going to go ahead and start the webinar now so everyone can start joining.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just put my headset on.
All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and start the broadcast now. Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Nathan Hicks, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar. We're going to give everyone just a few more minutes to log on and get set up here. At around 10:03 is when we'll officially start. All right, good morning, everyone. Looks like we have everyone logged on and attended. Oh, Michael, if you could give me keyboard and mouse control, please.
I just accepted it.
Great, thanks. All right, thank you for joining today's webinar discussion for the statewide pedestrian and bicycle data collection study that is currently ongoing with the Florida Department of Transportation. Today's agenda is we will, we'll be going through and giving introductions for the webinar staff today. We're going to give us sort of highlights of the project currently, the status of where we're at, as well as some of the results from the current statewide bicycle and pedestrian count survey that we sent out to stakeholders throughout the state. Later on, we'll be having Brett Boncourt from Kittleson going over the FDOT District 5 Trans and Ped tool, the Metro Plan Orlando and City Orlando bicycle and pedestrian count programs. Following that, we will have a discussion where we'll ask you to type in responses into the chat box for some of the questions and some of the comments that we require from you all regarding this project. And with that, we will go ahead and go through introductions. Brett?
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, like Nathan said, my name is Brett Boncourt. I'm with Kittleson Associates, but I'm here on behalf of FDOT District 5 Bike Ped Coordinator Deborah Tyrone. I'm here in our Orlando office, so I'll be presenting later on. Thanks for having me.
This is Martin Guttenplan. I'm with CDM Smith. I'm the project manager for this effort, and we've been working on. Well, I'll talk to you guys about it in more detail in a few minutes. But basically, I have been working on bicycle and pedestrian issues for 25 years, and counts is one thing that has been a long. It's been a long time coming. Nathan?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Nathan Hicks. I'm with CDM Smith as well. I'm working with Martin on this project, and we've been working on various bike and ped count projects or various bike and ped projects for about the past year or so, and I'm based here in the Miami office.
My name is Michael Stafford. I'm also work for CDM Smith. I'm an in-house consultant here at FDOT Central Office, working under Martin Guttenplan on this project.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
I saw. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Nothing. I just saw a question.
Oh, yes, I just saw it as well. Okay. All right. And Martin, if you could go ahead and start going through some of the highlights and main points of the project.
Sure. This project, an effort of the FDOT Statistics Office, with funding coming from the State Safety Office. We've got folks involved from Systems Planning, Office of Policy Planning, all the district ped bike safety champions, the coordinators, CDM Smith and Marlin Engineering. As you can see, we have a pretty wide, what we call a 360-degree view of the issue from within the department. And so with this call, we're trying to get a better view of things from the rest of the state, from other agencies. And basically, our purpose is to come up with a standardized methodology that we can use for counting peds and bikes in the state. And it's for everybody. Anyone who needs this data has a stake in how it's collected, how it's disseminated, all those types of things, which is why we're coming to you. As we're setting forth on a whole new program for the state, we want to make sure that we can do this in a way that benefits everybody. Let's see. Next slide, please. Okay. We kicked off in January. We'll be done at the end of the year. We've done a literature review. We've looked at the Traffic Monitoring Guide, Chapter 14, all the NCHRP reports that have come out, and we're looking to partner with the district, MPO, and local projects that are going on. We want to make sure we engage the ped bike community, and as I mentioned before, it's the consultant team is us and Marlin Engineering, CDM Smith. Next slide, please. Ultimately, what we're going to come from this are recommendations for the department on a ped bike count program. And we'll have technology type recommendations, where to place these locations for counts, and that'll be both at a network level, a facility level, and a counter-specific level, so that we share whatever we've learned, and Brett will go into some of those things. And we'll get into frequency of counting, partnering, and then we'll also have a section on factoring short-term counts to up to different levels, including AABT and AAPT where appropriate. We want to be coordinating with the FDOT crash data so we can come up with exposure data, an exposure rate, so we have a crash per number of bicyclists. And we'll also get into how we coordinate with fast acting FDOT performance measures. Next slide, please. Just a quick thing showing where we're at. We're really at this point. This is the end of the project stakeholder workshops, because we had so many people who could not attend the in-person one that we did last month. We're doing this webinar. After this, while we've been doing this, we've been developing our recommendations for count procedures. And then this month we expect to be making a decision about where and how to actually pilot our recommendations. After the pilot, we'll develop a final report. We'll adjust the recommendations based on what's learned, and then put together a final report for everybody. Am I speaking loud enough, and can I be heard?
We can hear you, Martin.
Okay, just checking, because I realized I was talking kind of fast and at a low volume. Okay,
No,
I'm good. Okay, next slide. So where we are now, the lit review is complete. We have met with, I think we had 13 meetings across the DOT with our internal stakeholders. We've gotten a fairly good result on the statewide survey. We'll be meeting with our technical team, the internal team, in about 2 to 3 weeks. And by the way, if you haven't figured out, these are different count shots showing different products and things that we're working with. Okay, next. So what we're looking for, because we're trying to build up, so to speak, from the local level, whatever type of pilot we do, we want to bring in, we want to draw heavily from local count programs at the district, MPO, regional, and local levels. So that is why we've been making such an effort to reach out to folks to find out what's going on in the state. And when we choose our pilot location, it'll be based on getting as much input as we can, as many different count technologies as we can, and the ease in coordinating all of that. We also want to make sure that we understand fully what your head-bike volume data needs are. There are things that may seem very obvious to you, but may not be as obvious to some of us. It's been an interesting process of engaging folks and finding out what they need, the form they need it in. And so this really is going to be this is going to be your program in some ways. So the department is really, to its credit, really reaching out to make sure that we get it right. So at this point, this concludes my 2 cents. We thought that to really prime the pump for discussion, we'd show what District 5 has been doing. They've really done a great job, the whole district, metro plan, and city of Orlando, in pulling together bike count data. So Brett's going to do this presentation, and then after that we'll have plenty of discussion time as needed. And again, thanks everybody for being part of this.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate that. Let's see, I think this screen sharing is popping up now. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can see Brad.
All right, it should just be one slide by Bicycle and Pedestrian Count Program. Thank you for having me again. Like Martin said, my name is Brett Boncory. I'm with Kittleson Associates. I'm the project manager for the FDOT District 5 Bike and Pedestrian Count Program here on behalf of Deborah Tyrone. And Martin kind of just wanted me to share about what we've been doing in District 5 as far as bicycle and pedestrian counting. So I kind of want to just go through what I'm going to talk about, kind of the why behind the counts. Why are we even doing them? Secondly, how we're doing it, maybe in going through the technology that we're using, the frequency, a few different aspects of the counts. Also kind of the what we're looking to do with these counts, and not just take them and have them sit on a shelf, but actually have them be usable for engineers and planners around the district. And then I'll also go through some other local efforts that have kind of been operating in parallel with the FDOT bike ped count effort with the City of Orlando and others. And then maybe some lessons learned as you move forward in the statewide discussion about bike and pedestrian counters. So first, the why. Why are we doing these counts? Just like our roadway projects, exposure data is important. On our roadway projects, we want to know the number of vehicles that are traveling on a roadway to normalize our crash statistics. We want to know the amount of activity using a certain facility in order to anticipate how we might best right-size that facility. It's the same thing with these bicycle and pedestrian counts, since that's one thing that we're trying to do is kind of in District 5 is to allow that to happen, make a more robust counting system so that we can normalize our crash data that we have. Also, as many of you know, Central Florida was recently called out as the #1 area for bike and pedestrian crashes within the state, and Dangerous by Design is called out for being one of the most dangerous places as well. So this is an important topic for us. It's a sensitive topic and one that we definitely want to tackle head on. Also, another reason why we're doing this is to supplement existing data sources. Yeah, you have census data, but then also Strava data, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, how we can, how this can help support that. And the National Bike and Pedestrian Documentation Project, which some of you might be familiar with, which is a national effort as well. So there was 2 parts of kind of our count program that we've instituted this year. Phase 1 were automated counts. That's the first thing I'll talk about. Phase 1, automated counts in partnership with Metro Plan Orlando. And then Phase 2 was our manual video counts that just happened in 1 month of September, and I'll talk about that as well. Phase 1, it was a year-long. It is a year-long pilot program, and we're actually currently still underway with it. And it was done in partnership with Metro Plan Orlando, and what we've been doing is counting at 55 locations throughout the Metro Plan Tri-County area, which is Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. And basically we're rotating these counters 5 locations at a time for each month. And in the end, we're going to do 55 locations, rotating them every month. And to select the counter technology, it was based on NCHRP report 797. Martin briefly mentioned it earlier. It says, I would recommend this document. This is a really good document. It's a pretty recently released document talking about really a full range of pedestrian and bicycle volume data collection methods. And so the region, all the partners in the Central Florida area got together, FDOT District 5, of course, Metro Plan Orlando, City of Orlando, the 3 counties, and then other stakeholders in the area got together to talk about which technology would be best for the region, which was an extremely helpful process as we try to kind of have a uniform way of sharing data, accessing that data amongst our partners locally, and I can kind of talk more about that later. What we ended up deciding on as a result of those discussions and some of the research is pyro boxes from EcoCounter, the Canadian-based company. What this is passive infrared technology. What this means is it detects bicycles or cyclists and pedestrians by comparing the temperature of the background to the heat patterns which are emitted from the persons passing in front of the sensor. It requires, it's been a pretty good technology for us. It requires minimal time and effort to set up. It's easily transported and moves from site to site. Like I mentioned, we're doing it every month, so these counters need to be moved every month, and it's been pretty easy to do so. Basically the detection zone of these counters can really be set for your specific need, whether you're counting at a trail location or a sidewalk location. These counters report to basically on an almost live fashion to the EcoVisio website, which you can see each one of the counters. There's a few screenshots here on the presentation. You can see each one of the counters, and you can easily pull those up and get reports for each one of those counters on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis. So they're pretty easily customized and printed out depending on what you're looking for. And really anyone can access them, whoever has a login and password. However, of course, with anything, there's always drawbacks. And with this one, we had a lot of benefits to them being easily transportable and all these things that I've already mentioned. But there were a few drawbacks as far as with the heat sensing technology. There's potential occlusion of groups of pedestrians. When a pedestrian is kind of walking in a group, it can only sense what's right in front of it. And so if there's 2 pedestrians walking side by side, there's potential for it not counting that. It can tend to be affected by extreme temperatures, but the manufacturer is adjusting for that as a result of kind of some of our efforts. And also the vertical element location. The post needs to be in between there needs to be a vertical element, a post or any sort of vertical element between the roadway and the sidewalk or the pedestrian pathway, because you need to face these sensors away from the vehicles, which are also heat-emitting objects, and you obviously don't want to count those. So there needs to be a vertical element, and if you don't have one, there is a potential solution. There's the picture in the middle. There are temporary mountable poles that you can install on the sidewalks to mitigate for this. And then another thing about these counters is that you can't necessarily distinguish between bicycle and pedestrians. It just senses hot, warm bodies. And so we did a few manual count locations at 15 locations to determine a bike-ped ratio to apply the rest of the locations. So now I wanted to move into phase 2 of these FDOT counts. That was the automated portion. Now these are the manual counts that we did in 1 month of September. And This is a lot more detailed information. We set up at 15 locations around the district that were chosen based on different characteristics of the roadway and the bike and pedestrian facilities and the land uses around it. We counted bicyclists and pedestrians for 5 days. There were 72-hour counts and 48-hour counts, and created a report on the daily and hourly averages at the intersection. And also, as you can see on the slide here on the bottom right, we actually had quite detailed information about the turning movement, the pedestrian movements at each one of the corners of each intersection. This helped us to determine, okay, which corners are busiest, where can we prioritize projects if we were to prioritize them. Because we did this in September, the reason for doing them in September actually was to coordinate it with the National Bike and Pedestrian Documentation Project, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a national effort to provide a consistent model of data collection and ongoing data for use by planners and governments and bicycle and pedestrian professionals to use in the future. And so we are providing all this data to that national project as well. 2014 and 2015 annual count reports have been produced for these. So if we want, you can see a draft copy of those. We can maybe have Martin send that out if you want to take a look at that. As far as next steps, obviously, like I mentioned before, and as many of you know, FDOT recently purchased statewide Strava data to be used by any government agency that's working with the DOT and their consultants. And we want to use this bike and pedestrian data to validate and calibrate that Strava data. As it becomes a statewide resource for bike and pedestrian data, these counts can be used to determine sample rates and consistency of data from city to city. So obviously another next step would be to continue our annual count program, to continue to see how the patterns decrease, increase over time, how they change, and then also to have reports, just to have these reports available for the locals in the area and the MPOs to be able to use them for bicycle and pedestrian planning purposes. Also, another really important next step that especially Deborah Tyrone here in District 5 we're pretty proud of is the TransPed tool that's been developed. What this is a GIS, interactive GIS tool that's really a data repository, and it includes anything and everything bike and pedestrian in the region, including these Phase 1 and Phase 2 bike and ped count data. There's a data visualization tool and data analysis tool. I'll kind of go into those right now. Like I said, it's a data bank, and it actually features over 50 data layers containing really a wealth of information, bicycle and pedestrian data. The issue we were having is, we have all this bike and pedestrian data, but it's all buried. Previously, all the bike and pedestrian counts were buried in other reports and studies that were done, for whatever other reason, traffic count studies or even traffic operations and safety studies or corridor studies or whatever it was. We had this bike and pedestrian count information, but it was all buried in these reports. So the idea behind this is to start mining that out and getting the counts into this GIS database that can be accessed by all. So this includes, like I said, the count data from the program that I just mentioned. It also includes bike and pedestrian crashes, sidewalk gaps, bike and pedestrian demand score, and level of service. It includes Strava data, bike ped suitability, and other land use and demographic information that's input into the regional model. It also includes a data visualization tool. It allows users to visualize the data and print maps based on whatever parameters they want to show. As you can see here, we kind of turned on a couple layers and kind of zoomed into one area in Sanford and said, okay, print me out those maps. It's pretty easy, pretty user-friendly. As part of that, you can also do data analysis as well. The tool provides the capability to conduct, it's really spatial and non-spatial analysis, to ultimately analyze strategic areas for bike and pedestrian projects. So, as we show schools and sidewalk gaps and crashes, you start to get it. And there's like a heat map. There's a heat map function on there as well. Once you start to see all these layers overlaid, you can start to see kind of where your bike and pedestrian facility infrastructure gaps are between key locations. The school board has come to us asking us for to look at these types of things, where sidewalk gaps are close to schools, and also the Department of Health has actually approached us about looking at kind of the bike ped crash heat map and seeing where we need to improve the safety along our roadways. So just a couple lessons learned. One thing we found is that you need to identify a department to be responsible for the counts. The best person to do this might not actually be the bike and pedestrian coordinator, for instance, or the bike ped safety specialist even. Typically, you'd want the experts in traffic counting to do this because it's no different than the other modes. It's no different than the traffic modes or the vehicle modes of counting and things like that. For the long term, you'll want to identify someone who does this and just having them incorporate it into their normal practices. Also, just a quick lessons learned. A lot of data is collected here, especially with the manual counts. Honestly, you have 4 corners. On each one of those corners, you have 2 approaches. For each one of those approaches, you have 3 turning movements. It's pretty resolute data, and so just make sure to allow enough time to post-process all that data. So I kind of wanted also to go into some of the other local efforts that have popped up in parallel with our FDOT counts, kind of as a result of that partnership meeting that I was talking about earlier, about identifying, okay, which counter would be good for the region. Hey, we want to get a good beat on the bike and pedestrian activity in the area. And so the City of Orlando has actually started a program of their own using the same PyroBox technology that DOT used. They've been counting 11 locations around Orlando on a little bit more of a permanent basis. And they've also assembled this into a report online, which you can access on their website, cityoforlando.net/Orlando counts. It's there on the screen right now. Pretty nice report there. And I kind of just wanted to mention as well, I mean, this effort regionally is gaining quite a bit of momentum. This is a message from the Mayor Buddy Dyer in Orlando saying, hey, we support this, and we really want to look at our bike and pedestrian network and see how we can improve it. And so it's really encouraging to see the locals grabbing onto this in a big way. Also, one other thing, as I was talking to City of Orlando preparing for this presentation, is that they also use myovision counters, which is another technology to be used. I'm a little less familiar with this because this is a City of Orlando effort, but they are reliable and easy to install. They upload to the vendor's website within 72 hours, so the City of Orlando is actually looking to because currently right now they're using these vision counters on just everyday projects, not necessarily doing it for bike and pedestrian counts only. They are using them for intersection operations projects and when they're counting vehicles at an intersection, and then they just look at those videos and they can determine pedestrian counts from there. They're not necessarily using these myovision counters for just bike and pedestrian collection yet, but they're looking to expand and establish a bigger and bolder annual count program with this technology throughout the city. So, so that is kind of a quick rundown of the efforts here in Central Florida. I know I kind of went quickly through that. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions right now, or I don't know if you want to do that now or later, Martin and Nathan, but here's my contact information, and Deborah, the bike pedestrian coordinator in District 5, her contact information as well if you have any questions. So thanks for allowing me to speak.
Great, thank you, Brett. We can actually go ahead and take a few questions if we have some now. I actually did see one come up from Dave Henderson regarding the MyoVision technology. My understanding, Brett, with that is it records the video over the 72 hours, and we actually did at the April 27th meeting. We had some staff from another city or county that were using this technology, and they spoke about it. And we can send out some of the comments and some of the notes that they noted about that particular technology. But essentially, it just goes up above the intersection and records the counts. And then, do they send you the data afterwards after they process it, or is that something that you have to do internally?
So, from my understanding, the City of Orlando actually would set up these devices at each intersection, and then they would send the video to the vendor. Maybe some others on the call might have more experience, but it sounds like they would send the videos to the vendor. The vendor would then post-process this data and send it back to you in a report format. Yeah, I definitely remember, Nathan, a few comments, both benefits and drawbacks of this technology. Definitely something to be explored for sure.
Correct. My follow-up question was, oh, sorry, go ahead, Martin.
This is Martin. My experience has been that the data is sent probably abroad, and you get the results back. We've used it for several projects. We've used it with FDOT for an access management project, and they provided the count data. We were also able to get the actual footage so that we could look at it as well. But whether or not it's done manually, or whether or not it's done in an automated fashion, I can't say specifically. What I had heard several years back was that it was gone through manually, but that may have changed.
But that's something that we can certainly follow up. And I should also note, following this webinar, we're going to send out a sort of comprehensive document with some of the questions and answers, as well as we are recording this webinar so we can go back and anyone can go back and review it. But for some of these questions that we can't answer today, we will follow up and let everyone know. And with that,
before we go on, Nathan, in case people aren't familiar with the question and answer pane, it'd be a good idea to show how that works, and then also point, there's already been some discussion on the pane regarding the FDOT test bed, and Jamie or Steve may want to elaborate on that.
Sure. Michael, if you could give me keyboard and mouse control, please, and make yourself the presenter again. And just to give everyone a quick overview of the GoToMeeting or the GoToWebinar structure, there is a questions panel within the overall overview where you can send in a question and we can respond back with an answer there or just verbally. And in this next session, it will be a discussion session for a few different questions that we have for you all. And you can send your questions in there so that way we can go through and review them. And excuse me, I'm just going to the next slide.
While Nathan's doing that, I did hear back from Jamie Whitley from FDOT, and they are evaluating the eco counter, urban multi, and then the TVC EM unit. The TVC unit is, and this is independent of this project, but this project is helping shape what they're going to evaluate and how that all coordinates. The TVC unit is installed in Tallahassee right now in conjunction with a motor vehicle test bed that's being used for truck counting as well. Okay, Nathan, back to you.
Great, thanks, Martin. And that is correct. There is a parallel study that's going on currently, testing some equipment for bicycle and pedestrian counting technology. And we'll, of course, be looking at those results as well whenever we're making some of our recommendations. But now we're going to go through a sort of discussion. And the following questions are what we would like to know from you. For example, this first one, why agencies are conducting pedestrian bicycle counts. So if your agency is currently doing this, why are they? Is it simply just to have before and after counts for a facility that is currently being built or will be built to have a comparison between your counts? Is it just to know where or what facilities are currently being used? If you have any questions or if you would like to make a comment, please do so in the questions panel in the overview, and we will go ahead and discuss that. Also, if you would like to discuss your question over the microphone, we can unmute you if you would like to do that instead. Also, some additional questions that we were hoping to have some more information on are what are agencies counting and where are the agencies counting, as well as what sorts of technologies you're currently using and if you have any associated issues with them. That question in particular is one that we would certainly like to know more information about, the different technologies to use. There's a lot of different technology out there, and as we saw, there's passive infrared, there's video count, there's manual count, and each one has their own pros and cons. And so to have sort of lessons learned or a sort of understanding of what you're currently doing would certainly help us as well whenever we're developing recommendations, depending on the type of counting that that would be attempted to be performed. So, saw a question in here as well. Oh yes, for the pilot study locations, we are still in the process of determining those, and I believe we'll be having some recommendations at the upcoming technical meeting in June. Is that correct, Martin?
That's correct.
All right.
And we'll be back in touch. We'll be back in touch with some of you regarding that. And Kira, thanks for your offer.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. So a couple questions come up here from Francesca Taylor for Brett. First question was, where did you find the mobile poles? Lack of vertical element has been a drawback for our program as well, for Palm Beach and PO.
Yeah, so to answer that first question, typically our data collection sub actually had the poles in their inventory because they've had this happen before. Now there are obviously a few considerations before installing these poles on sidewalks as far as permitting and things like that. So we actually they had that option. We tried just to avoid any locations that didn't have vertical mounting poles between the roadway and the sidewalk, just because there are, permitting and different coordination efforts to be done. So I can definitely send along the contact information of that data collection firm, but they just had it in their inventory.
Okay, great. And there was actually a second question as well, which was, how has the data you've been collecting been useful for planners and engineers? We are still collecting our initial counts, and so far we've created a summary report, mostly using factor groups or disseminating raw data for those doing traffic studies. Are there any suggestions on how to make the data more relevant for users?
Yeah. So, we're still kind of in the middle of our automated count study because it's a yearly program. It will be ending in August. At that point, we'll actually have results to share with everyone. But what we're planning to do with that is to start looking at, the first thing, or one of the things is to start looking at Strava and, what is Strava actually giving us? And then also to start prioritizing maintenance projects and things of that nature. I believe Deborah Tyrone is looking to do something like that, where on our 3R projects to, if we have counts at that location, to know, this intersection definitely needs special consideration for ADA users and things like that, because we actually have been splitting out our counts for the manual ones, at least, to general pedestrians, and then ADA users, bicyclists on the roadways, things like that, which, also with the bike on roadway versus bike on sidewalk, you can start to see, where are bicyclists not feeling comfortable being on the roadway, and you have a lot of bicycles on the sidewalk. You can start to say, we need to make sure we provide bicycle facilities here on the actual, on our DOT roadways. So that's probably best I can answer that question for now. I think how to make it more relevant for users. I think there's a lot of applications. A lot of applications are yet to be seen still with the data, but putting it on the interactive data JS website, I think, is the first step for getting it out there, for kind of to allow planners to use it however they want. Again, I think also kind of if once we start to get more of a network of these counters and we have crash data, we can start to normalize this crash data, just like we do with traffic counts. And so that's obviously one quick next step that we can use that would really help to fill out our data hole.
From the DOT perspective, there's been a request that we look at the high ped bike crash locations and high ped bike crash corridors, and also to look at some rural settings as well. But the idea being that this stuff can be used immediately for prioritizing projects in the future to address the issue.
Great. And one other item I would like to note about this particular study is we do want this to be usable in a way for other areas or outside of just Florida. We are coordinating with other national initiatives regarding how we develop the methodology for the counting, because we do want the data to be usable as well for other stakeholders outside of the state. So FHWA is another entity we've been talking with as well, and they are currently revising some of their, I believe the TMG formats, data formats, and so we're going to be coordinating with that. And we just got we have a comment from David Henderson about regarding their data and how it's used, saying we're counting it for trends for before and after, mostly manual counts, but they do have 2 multi-counters and a few pyro boxes that are okay. And there was another question from Sean Davis. Is there a focus to focus on trip types like recreational, economically required, commute, etc.? And specifically on trip types, that may depend a bit on the facility. I know that we're aiming to have more than just bicycle lanes. I know we are coordinating with some of the other trail offices, or would like to, so that way we can look and see what are the current trip types, or beyond what is currently just being used, and more than just commuting trips or recreational trips. So we would like to focus more than on just one trip type in particular. And there was another question.
I'd like to expand on that and to pose a question to some of you who are working with the travel demand modeling community, perhaps. Is there a need to focus somewhat on trip type, and if so, is anyone doing it? And this is something that we'll discuss a bit in the report. The Strava data that we're getting attempts to separate by recreation and trip type. For those of you familiar with Strava, you know it's used primarily by recreational riders, but it has an algorithm that picks out commute type trips, and also allows self-selection of commuters. In Martin's world, I think any trip by walking or bicycling is an important trip and needs to be counted. Whether or not we get into trip purpose, particularly with this study, is yet to be seen.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we have a few more questions. These might be geared more towards you, Brett. How do you log in for the District 5 TransPed tool, and does the D5 project deal with any equity issues?
Yeah, good questions. I'll answer the first one first. So for the D5 TransPed tool, so if you, for those who want to take a look, I know we showed the website earlier, but if you just type in FDOT TransPed tool, Google should give you a link if you can't see the link right now, if you weren't able to write it down. But just to be able to use the data and see most of the 50 layers that are in there, including the bike and pedestrian counts and sidewalk gaps and things like that, you shouldn't actually need a login. It's actually open to the public on cfgis.com. But there is a login. There is like a login for administrators. One of the things that Deborah's using it for in-house is to prioritize sidewalk gaps based on all the information that we have in whatever location it is. So there's an analysis tool that allows us to see the different bike and pedestrian demand, the different suitability and different bike and pedestrian suitability index in that area to start to prioritize sidewalk gap projects. So having a login only gives you really that additional capability. So you should be able to see most of what is available there. And then as far as equity issues, I'd probably have to ask for a little more clarification on that from David. It was purely a data collection project, and so as far as equity, for the automated counts, we could only sense people going past the counts. But then for the manual counts, like I mentioned, the only thing I could see as equity with that is counting ADA users as well, and that's an important piece of it. Because if we have a lot of ADA users, or just in general ADA users, we want to be able to provide our specific needs there and extra attention there, whether that's accessible pedestrian signals at the intersections or whatnot, things like that. So I don't know if David can provide any, and maybe that's what he's asking about, selecting the locations for equity issues. Basically, a lot of the locations that were selected were based on high, perceived high pedestrian and bike activity and demand. And then, like I said, land use as well, denser areas, CRAs, presence of bike facility, number of lanes, things like that. Demographics were not as much looked at besides that, so I'll say that I think that could be something that is improved. That's a good point.
Okay, great, thanks, Brett. A follow-up comment from Francesca Taylor. We've tried to assume trip types through the use of zoning data. The aggregated county-wide zoning area types. The issues with this method are there's difficulty in finding one zoning layer to refer to that covers all the jurisdictions of the county, and formulating a process around this method that is not based on subjectivity, especially in areas where two zoning designations meet at a count location. And that is a good point with that last bit, because you would need some sort of methodology for determining which zoning to use in particular. So thanks for that.
There was a question from David as well on are we developing a process for bike ped data collection as part of the FDOT scoping process? And the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we would welcome anyone's experience with that. Amy Longstreet in our office, who has a lot of project development experience, will be working on some sample language, but anyone who specifically is building before and after counts into project scoping, we'd love to see that language. And we've had recommendations within our technical team to develop that language.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, we're going to move to some of the final questions, such as storing and disseminating data. What are your data needs if you are not currently counting? What types of data do you need? Do you just need the raw counts, or do you need more, such as exposure data and directional data? And what do you all want to see from the department's count program? What do you feel would be important when you're when looking towards the future and the developing of this program? And then finally, we'll go over some of the pilot study locations, which we've discussed to a degree. I do have one comment about that as well. We are wanting to have a sort of blend of pilot study locations in terms of maybe some urban or suburban and perhaps rural as well, because we do want this to be used at a statewide level. So if you would like to coordinate, or if you would like to discuss with us possible locations for this, please do follow up with us afterwards, and then we can have some discussion on that. And saw a comment here just from Sean Davis. For example, for data needs, does it need to be publicly accessible? GIS reference? Does it need to have the FDOT local roadway ID reference? And so if you have some questions or comments about some of these final areas for the discussion, go ahead and start typing and let us know, and we'll go through those as well. So for example, for the storing and disseminating of data, do you currently, if you have that data, do you currently have it within your area or within your department or agency, or do you mainly rely on the post-processing of a vendor to give you that data, and then you have the edited data? Do you have the raw data? Those kinds of questions or comments are something that in particular we would like to know more about. With who we've talked to so far, it definitely seems like some of the agencies have the process data afterwards that's given to them, but I believe, Martin, we are looking more towards having the raw data for all of these counts. Is that correct?
Yes. And I'll speak for what I've heard from the FDOT Transtat folks. They see, the primary storage and distribution occurring through their RCI and TCI databases. Again, there does the issues that we still need to discuss and address is that aggregation. Do we treat it like motor vehicle counts or not, and where, when, that sort of thing.
had a question come in from David Henderson. Are there any non-motorized model development activities that are currently underway? Data collection should be shaped to meet those needs. Martin, do you know of anything currently underway?
Just the work that's been done in District 7 and I think some in District 5. But this still is, we haven't had discussions yet with the modeling community. That's kind of one of those things on our to-do list. If any of you are working on non-motorized demand models that, or even gravity models that get at demand, we'd be interested in talking with you.
Great, thanks, Martin. And I saw a comment from Kara Schwartz, and we will be contacting you further following this webinar for pilot locations and methodology and storage. So thank you for that. And we'll wait just a little longer just in case there's some people sending in some additional comments or questions. For any of these, for anything that you've heard of today so far. As was mentioned earlier, we will be having another technical team meeting in mid-June, and that'll give us a much better understanding of some of the draft recommendations that we will be discussing, and that we will be finalizing. And we'll, of course, be sending some of that information out as well further along once it is currently finalized.
And I guess on a related note, if any of you, would like to have further discussions with us, you can shoot us an email. We can set up a time to call.
Another comment from David Henderson. We have account projects coming up this summer, and we would be happy to coordinate with you. Thank you, David. We'll be reaching out to you regarding that.
And I can potentially speak on one of David's other questions about non-motorized model development. Although not intimately familiar with it, I know as part of the TransPed tool, like I mentioned, there are a few layers in there that are from the CFRPM, the Central Florida Regional Planning Model, that talk about bicycle and pedestrian demand. I believe those layers are built simply on census information to basically show for each one of the TAZs what kind of bike and ped demand you can expect. So that's definitely, you can feel free to explore that. It's actually on the TransPed website, so feel free to explore that if you'd like to see kind of what's showing up there. But other than that, I'm not sure of any other model development activities for non-motorized.
Great, thank you, Brad. One other thing, if we currently don't have it on the slide, but if you've used the Strava data in any sort of way for your methodologies or how you've used it, we'd also be interested in that as well. We do see that particular data set involved in the overall methodology and recommendations that we'll be presenting to DOT. And at this time, I don't see any other comments or questions in particular. Of
There
course,
was, um, I was just, yeah, Sean picked up on it. He just sent out, Sean Davis recently sent a survey out on Strava data use. And I was going to mention that. And we will forward that information to you guys as well. One of the other things that Sean mentioned earlier, Sean is with the State Safety Office and is really their data specialist, is that because they're concerned with ped bike safety on every roadway in the state, not just necessarily the state system, that's the driving force behind their use of Strava data, just so they can get a relative amount of use on roadways. You know, with this project, we'll be able to better calibrate that data to permanent locations, so we'll have a better picture. But in their case, where they don't expect to necessarily have you know, full set count data available, just knowing whether there's high use, medium use, or low use is extremely valuable. And Sean also mentioned that he'll have that report ready in the next week or so.
okay, that's great to hear. Thank you, Sean and Martin. At this time, don't see any other questions or comments that we missed. Do you see anything else, Martin?
I don't think so.
Okay. So as was mentioned earlier, for the next steps, we'll review this information from today. We'll sort of create a sort of finalized document that we can send to all of you regarding some of the questions and comments and concerns from today and the meeting on the 27th. We will have the next technical team meeting, and we can follow up with you all if you would like to know more about that. And if you have any other, sorry, we had one more comment from David Henderson regarding the park system, since they may have needs or opportunities related to recreational use. That's a good suggestion, because they may have, they would actually have fairly similar needs to all of this.
When we sent out the statewide survey for data needs and collection, we had Robin Birdsong with the Sun Trail program send that out through her whole network of trail managers and park managers and the like. So we've received some information back from them. We have Brian Rusher, I think that's how you pronounce your name, from DEP on the call today as well. So we are definitely building in that trail and recreational aspect into what we're doing. If any of you have any specific contacts that you think some people we should reach out to, by all means, please provide us with their name, email address, or phone number or something so we can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin. And I believe they were, part of that was within some of the external stakeholder one-on-one meetings, correct?
Well, when we spoke with Robin.
Correct, right.
Yeah. Okay, and Brian indicated he'll provide us contact information for state trail managers.
Great. Thank you, Brian. All right. Well, if anyone has any other questions or comments, our contact information is here, and we will be reaching out to everyone following this webinar with additional information as well as some of the links, especially the D5 TransPed tool. And we thank you for being on today and for all your questions and comments. This was very helpful, and we'll create an overall document that we'll send out to you all. And we hope to hear from you again. Any final questions or comments, Martin or Brett?
Just a big thank you to everybody.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and we will go ahead and close the webinar now. Thank you.